Assalam, hello and good day. This is our assignment 1 research proposal presentation for our GE6173 narrative inquiry course. As the title of our proposal, it would be Lighting the Path, ESL Teachers' Adventure of Perseverance in Rural Areas of B40 background students with limited exposure to the English language.
Before we go into the nitty-gritty aspects of this research, it is pertinent for us to understand the contextual situation on why this research is being developed, because in general lands, states in Malaysia with greater proportions of rural schools performed poorer in standardized examinations, especially in SPM, and this is strongly supported by Osman et al. In 2019, and it is said that these rural schools are dominated by B40 students who are reported to have lower English language proficiency, critical thinking skills, communication skills, and English literacy, spotted by Wahi et al. In 2019. However, albeit the initiatives and reformed educational blueprint policy that will end in 2025. This research is aimed to understand the challenges of ESL teachers of teaching B40 students in rural areas so that we could understand the factors underlying this issue that will be in depth discussed in our presentation later on.
Next, moving on to problem statement. Teaching English as a second language in rural areas comes with significant challenges, especially for students from B40 backgrounds who have limited exposure to the English language. All four of us in this group are currently teaching in schools from rural areas in Malaysia, hence we found our common ground for our research study. ESL teachers in these settings encounter various obstacles, like us, including a shortage of qualified English language educators, inadequate facilities, limited teaching materials, and poor infrastructure. Well, according to Law and Azlina in 2022, students' low proficiency in English, negative attitudes toward learning the language, and minimal parental support further complicate the teaching process. Understanding these experiences of these teachers is essential in identifying the support systems, teaching strategies, and policy interventions needed to enhance language education in rural schools. Therefore, throughout this research, we aim to highlight their journey, shedding light on their perseverance and resilience. By doing so, we hope to contribute to the development of more effective support mechanisms, ultimately improving English language teaching and learning in underprivileged communities.
Moving on to the focus of study, where this study focuses on the perseverance of ESL teachers in rural areas, particularly those teaching students from B40 backgrounds with limited exposure to the English language. And teaching in such environments presents unique challenges, including a lack of resources, low student motivation, and minimal opportunities for English language immersion outside the classroom. Despite these difficulties, many ESL teachers persist in their efforts to enhance students' English proficiency, often employing innovative teaching strategies and demonstrating resilience in the face of adversity. We believe the study aims to explore the experiences, challenges, and coping strategies of ESL teachers working in these undeserved communities. Specifically, it will investigate the factors that contribute to their perseverance, such as intrinsic motivation, professional support, and adaptive teaching methodologies. It will examine the impact of socio-economic constraints of students' learning progress and how teachers navigate these barriers to ensure effective language acquisition. Given the limited research on ESL teachers' resilience in rural low-income settings, this study seeks to fill the gap by providing insights into the lived experience of these educators. The findings will be valuable, hopefully, for the policymakers, teaching training institutions, and education stakeholders in developing better support system for ESL teachers uh, and improving English and language education for students from disadvantaged backgrounds.
There are two research objectives that we have come up for this topic. The first one being to identify ESL teachers' challenges in teaching students of B40 background in rural areas with limited exposure to the English language. And the second one would be to propose the solutions to the teachers' challenges in teaching students of B40 background in rural areas with limited exposure to the English language. We have also prepared two research questions for our topic. The first one is, what are the challenges ESL teachers face when teaching students of B40 background with limited exposure to the English language in rural areas? And the second one is, what are the ways to overcome the problems that ESL teachers encounter when teaching students of B40 background with limited exposure to the English language in rural areas?
There are a few significance of the study, such as understand the factors impacting this foreign familiarity of English language to the students of P40 background. We also can justify the challenges faced by the teachers based on data analyzed from the factors. And lastly, it allows educators to design a learning environment or tools or even assessment that correspond to students' level of familiarity and proficiency.
After we are done with the process of identifying our research questions, it has helped us in processing a clear focus on our studies, and hence we come up with a conceptual framework. Our conceptual framework is visualized based on the literature review that we have gathered based on the research topic. Let's take a look at it, shall we? We have identified two variables, which are independent and dependent variables, based on our conceptual framework. The independent variable, or also known as the explanatory variable, here is B40 students who have limited exposure to the English language in the rural areas. As for the dependent variable, that would be the challenges ESL teachers face when teaching B40 students who have limited exposure to the English language in the rural areas. As for the moderators, there are few that we have discerned in which these factors could modify the relationship between independent and dependent variables. The mentioned factors are as follows. The first one is students' attitudes towards learning English. Second one is culture at home. Third one is lack of English language practice. And the last one is rural cultural setting.
I would like to apologize if my eyes are moving because the screen is right in front of me. Now, let us explore on the background context of B40 students in rural areas. There are consistent findings that reported that B40 family of lower English proficiency mainly resides in rural or suburban areas, and this is reported by Mohammed et al. In 2024. We are known that English is a complex process. Higher income families have the privilege to provide supplementary measures for these challenges or for this issue. Hence, this is why the presence of a gap between and just a juxtaposition between higher financial status students and B40 students on their English language proficiency, and this is found by Shahar et al. In 2019. Learning of the language itself needs an extra effort, especially for lower income community or the B40 community, because the speech community is not familiarized or does not explore and expose to English language as the main communication.
To add on the background context of B40 students in rural areas, Kulil 2021 in his article Teaching English for Young Learners in Rustic Area Teaches Challenges has said that students' socioeconomic background positively correlated with their motivation to study English. Also, Samose 2022 in his exploring the impact of limited English exposure on language proficiency among junior high school students in rural areas has mentioned that in many rural regions, English is rarely spoken outside academic settings, leading to insufficient practice opportunities for students. This lack of exposure significantly hampers language acquisition, as consistent practice and interaction are critical for developing language skills.
Alright, to add on to the background context of B40 students from rural areas, one of the critical challenges faced in rural education is the high dropout rate among students from B40 households. According to Seward et al. 2019, the high rate of dropout is related to the lack of interest in school, the not conducive house, lack of support from parents, and low awareness of the importance of education among the B40 household. Many students in underprivileged communities struggle with distraction at home, financial burdens, and a lack of encouragement to pursue their studies. Without proper motivation and support, they become disengaged, ultimately leading to higher dropout rates. Well, according to Umaira and Maslawati in 2022, B40 students need to attend school for their education as it helps the pupils to gain more knowledge, adapt and socialize with others, and to lead a better life in future.
There is a large array on literature review that factorize frequent absentees and financial responsibilities as the main culprit of the lower English proficiency among B40 students. Now, Juliana and Hisham in 2020 found that management of education for B40 students rationalized these universal issues are faced due to dropout rates, absenteeism, and subpar academic performances. Again, the Malaysian Educational Policy and Planning and Research Division in 2017 research stated that disparities between underprivileged students of rural and urban areas are grounded on its critical attendance rate. Why? Because Saha in 2023 studied that students in B40 family are burdened with declining financial status in family context, which leads to frequent absenteeisms and constant neglects on their learning needs.
Alright, one of the prominent issues of B40 students in rural areas is actually frequent absentees and financial responsibilities. Well, according to Halik and Nusrath, in one of the articles written in 2020, which entitled Challenges Faced by ESL Teachers in Teaching English to the Students in Rural Schools, they believe that absenteeism from school is due to lack of school necessities, taking care of siblings as parents look for food, and even doing petty jobs to supplement on the family income. Well, according to both Otskin in 2013, both separate article by Otskin in 2013 and Sommans in 2019, they both believe that health problems are reported to be the primary justification for absenteeism caused by the student themselves. Alright, this is followed up by McKenzie 2019, which stated that the social environment leads to the pupils' absenteeism in school and uninterested attitudes toward learning and teaching.
It's tectonic to understand that learners' attitudes towards English language are the substantial shift on their language proficiency. In general length, low attention and insouciance are the major culprit rather than their inability itself, because it is evident in Yakub and Yunus in 2019 showed that there are consistent negative patterns on students' attendance, demotivation and ignorance on English language to a point where teachers are required to use translanguaging, but it defeats the purpose of language learning itself. Now, it is strongly emphasized by Saha in 2023 also mentioned that teachers are highly frustrated with demotivated learners and recurring instructions despite different pedagogical approach that have been initiated. Hence, they summarize that the students' language proficiency are not exclusive towards external factors, but also their intrinsic motivation itself.
Teaching English in rural schools is indeed challenging, particularly when students perceive English as a difficult and intimidating subject. According to Law and Azlina in their articles in 2022, Challenges Teaching English in Rural Schools, Challenges and Solution, this is due to the dominance of their local language, which limits their opportunities to use English in daily life. With minimal exposure, students did not see the relevance of learning the language. Furthermore, students' negative attitudes towards learning English have been identified as one of the major obstacles of ESL teachers, according to Halik and Nusrath in 2020. Many students feel discouraged, unmotivated, and even anxious about learning English, which directly impacts their progress and willingness to participate in lesson. Therefore, to address this issue, it is crucial to create engaging learning experience, foster a positive mindset, and provide more opportunities for language exposure. By doing so, we can help students to overcome their fear of English and develop the confidence they need to use it effectively.
The next part would touch on the limited exposure to English. Neural and City 2024, in their article Factors Influencing Parental Involvement in Children's English as a Second Language Learning, a case study of B40 and T20 families in Malaysia, has stated that B40 parents express limitations in their ability to help their children with English due to their own lack of proficiency in the language. This is further supported by Zulkifli and Razali 2019 in their article entitled Malaysian rural secondary school students' attitudes towards learning English as a second language, in which they mention that in B40 family, English is not commonly used language for communication purposes. They also mention that many students view English as a foreign language that is only spoken during language lessons. When talking about rural schools, English is not considered as a language that is thoroughly used. As quoted by Zulkifli and Rosali in the same journal article mentioned earlier, it is the lack of need in using the English language. Rural students do not have the impetus or immediate need to learn the language as they feel that they would be able to survive living in the rural community. This is also mentioned in Shikalepo's 2020 article, Improving the Quality of Education at Rural Schools in Namibia, where he stated that, according to public perception, rural schools are considered to provide lower quality instruction compared to urban schools.
Next, I will be talking about the methodology and research design. This study employs a qualitative research approach with a small and purposive sampling method. Specifically, we will conduct in-depth interviews with 4 ESL teachers who are currently teaching students with limited exposure to the setting English language in rural settings, specifically in Malaysia. The research design that we are going to adopt is oral history approach. Oral history approach, it's a qualitative method that focuses on collecting first-hand narratives from individuals who have lived through specific experiences. We believe that they have direct experience and insights relevant to our study. By conducting in-depth interviews with the teachers, which we aim to document their experiences, teaching strategies, and the challenges they encounter.
In order for us to develop a simultaneous findings with the same frequency, we ask consent from 4 teachers who have experience in teaching B40 students with limited exposure to the English language in rural areas. Now, out of the 4 samples, there are 3 female teachers and 1 male teachers who resides in Pahang, Julau, Miri, and Kelantan. Now, these geographical patterns not only help us to understand the challenges of teaching English language towards B40 students, but it also helps us understand these challenges based on the cultural context and speech community as well as their beliefs according to the geographical patterns being mentioned. This research is developed through qualitative approach where the main instrument is on interview, and we decided to use the semi-structured interview as advised by the lecturer because it allows us to prepare questions beforehand and still have the flexibility to explore the topic based on samples answers. We employ recorded interview through audio recording and the transcription of the interview in either verbatim or intelligent verbatim depends on the complexity of the answer.
Next, in this slide, we managed to find few interview questions of the related topic. So as you can see, this is the interview questions that we found from this article entitled Teaching English for Young Learners in Rustic Area, Teachers' Challenges. So these are the questions we are going to adapt and incorporate in our interviews with our teachers later on. We also found another article which is related interview questions from another article which is related to our topic. The title of this article is English Language Learning Experience Among EBAN Secondary ESL Learners in a Rural Area. Alright, I'm going to walk through the research procedures. There are 8 steps. Step number 1, we are going to identify issues about the samples. But before that, we are going to review relevant literature and previous study in order for us to define the key issues related to the selected samples. Step number 2, we are going to prepare interview questions. We are going to develop open-ended questions that align with the research objectives and also adapt interview questions from previous research. Step number 3, we are going to identify teachers. So as you know, we are going to interview senior teachers from our schools. Now, step number 4, we are going to conduct interviews. We are going to record interviews with permission for accurate data collection. Step number 5, prepare transcript. So after we have interviewed the teacher, we are going to prepare the transcription of the interview. After preparing transcript, we are going to move on to step number 6, which is oral history narrative analysis. We are going to identify recurring themes, patterns, and key narratives, which we highlight personal experiences of the teachers, their emotion, as well as perspective. We are going to compare narratives to historical as well as contextual frameworks. Then move on to step number 7, compare and contrast data. We're going to examine similarities and differences across responses of these teachers and categorize findings based on themes and research questions. Last but not least, step number 8, which is analyze findings. We're going to synthesize the data to draw meaningful conclusion. We are going to relate the findings to existing theories or frameworks, and we are going to identify the implication and potential recommendation for future research and as well for us to improve our teaching.
Furthermore, as a requirement for us to finish this assignment, we have been asked to choose narrative analysis to analyze the data. Based on our full discussion, we have chosen the content analysis as it the best suited with our study because it involves systematically examining textual or visual data to identify patterns, themes, and meanings, often through coding and categorization to understand the underlying messages and context of the data. We believe that content analysis help us to understand the underlying meanings, patterns, and relationships within the data rather than simply counting occurrences. There are a few processes involved, such as the data collection, coding, and analysis, and also interpretation. So first of all, during the data collection, we are going to gather the relevant qualitative data based on the interviews, and then we're going to transcribe the interviews, and then only then we can develop a coding scheme or framework uh, to categorize the data based on themes, concepts, or keywords. So, for example, over here, we might can identify what factors that uh, what factors that contribute to the issues. It could be environmental factor or it could be any other factor. Next, we're going to analyze the coded data to identify patterns, relationships, and recurring themes. And only then we can interpret the findings in the context of the research question and broader social, culture, or even historical context.
When it comes to validity and reliability, we have decided to go with three things when it comes to our research. The first one would be research ethics. We believe that the principles and standards that guide us as a researchers in conducting our studies with integrity, we need to ensure that our research is conducted responsibly and ethically. That being said, we need to make sure that we have our own core principles, and that would be our main point, which is integrity. The second one would be interview questions from the past papers. We have decided to go with the interview questions from the past papers because we believe that these questions have been proven to be reliable, and there are many outcomes that have come out based on using these questions in the past papers. The last one would be the internal consistency. We believe that despite having different items on the test of questionnaires, we would be able to correlate them with each other provided that we have the internal consistency. As mentioned earlier, we have four potential participants who consist of teachers who have the experience of teaching English in their rural areas. That being said, our interview will be in the form of semi-structured interview because we have a set of open-ended questions to ask to the potential participants to cover the main topic of our interest. Other than that, our semi-structured interview will be in the form of audio recording so that it will be easy for us to prepare the transcription later.
Next, to ensure our studies are conducted responsibly, protecting the rights, dignity, and well being of participants while maintaining integrity in the research process, we have come up with a few ways to uphold the research ethics. First of all, we are going to have an informed consent where we're going to give a full disclosure of information such as the purpose of the research, the procedures involved, the duration, and the method of the research. They need to understand the potential risks and benefits and how their data will be used and protected. The participants should fully understand the information provided so that their voluntariness must be completely without any coercion, pressure, or undue influence. This informed consent is very important to protect participants' rights and autonomy and also ensure ethical integrity and transparency in research. That is why we also have the confidentiality where we are going to only use pseudonyms instead of their actual names. Last but not least, we will also emphasize on the plagiarism and authorship. In order for us not to plagiarize any work that has been done by other researchers, we will use proper citations, which is APA 7, and paraphrase effectively without copying structure or wording. We will give the credit to all sources, including image, graphs, and data, and we are also going to use plagiarism detection tools to check for unintentional similarities. Next, we also going to do the best practices for ethical authorship, where we are going to discuss authorship rules before starting the research and follow the agreed criteria for determining authorship order, and also be transparent about each contributor's role in the research.